The nursery paint fumes made my head spin, but I couldn't stop now. I had to finish before Mark got home. My swollen belly bumped against the stepladder as I reached up to add another cloud to the sky-blue ceiling. "Christina, honey, are you up there?" My father's voice echoed from downstairs. "In here, Dad," I called back, carefully descending the ladder. Robert appeared in the doorway, his silver hair disheveled and worry lines creasing his forehead. "What are you doing?" "You shouldn't be on a ladder in your condition," I laughed, patting my 8-month pregnant belly. "I'm fine, Dad. The twins and I are tough." He shook his head, a mix of exasperation and pride in his eyes. "You've always been stubborn, just like your mother." He glanced around the room, taking in the half-finished mural. "Where's Mark? Shouldn't he be helping with this?" I felt a familiar pang of disappointment. "Working late again. You know how it is with his new promotion." Dad's frown deepened. "He's been working late an awful lot lately." "It's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "He's just trying to provide for us, for the babies." Dad grunted, unconvinced. "Well, I brought over that crib you wanted. It's downstairs in the truck. I'll bring it up." "Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." As he headed downstairs, I sank into the rocking chair by the window, rubbing my aching back. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mark and I had been so excited when we first moved in, dreaming of filling it with the sounds of children's laughter. Now, more often than not, I found myself alone. The front door opened and my heart leapt. "Mark?" I called out. "Hey, babe," he replied, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I struggled to my feet as he appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and shirt rumpled. "You're home early," I said, moving to kiss him. He turned his cheek at the last second, my lips grazing his stubble. "Yeah, meeting got canceled." His eyes darted around the room. "What's all this?" "I've been working on the nursery," I said, gesturing proudly. "What do you think?" Mark's face was unreadable. "It's nice. Listen, I've got some work to finish up. I'll be in the office." Before I could respond, he was gone. I stood there feeling deflated when Dad reappeared, lugging the crib box. "Was that Mark I heard?" he asked, setting down the box. I nodded, blinking back tears. He had to work. Dad's jaw clenched. "Christina, honey, is everything okay between you two?" "Of course," I said quickly. "He's just stressed about the babies coming." "Uh-huh," Dad said, clearly unconvinced. "Well, let's get this crib set up, shall we?" As we worked, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. Something was off with Mark had been for weeks now, but I pushed the thought aside. We were about to become parents. Everything would be fine. Just as we finished assembling the crib, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Going out with coworkers. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. "Christina?" Dad's voice was gentle. "What is it?" I showed him the text, my vision blurring with unshed tears. Dad's face darkened. "That's it. I'm going to have a talk with him." "No, Dad, please," I begged. "I'm sure it's nothing. He's just—" A sharp pain cut through my abdomen, making me gasp. I clutched my belly, panic rising. "Christina?" Dad's voice seemed far away. "What's wrong?" "The babies," I whispered, another wave of pain hitting me. I think they're coming." As Dad rushed to call an ambulance, I sank to the floor, surrounded by stuffed animals and half-finished dreams. Where was Mark? Why wasn't he here? As another contraction gripped me, I realized with startling clarity that something was very, very wrong in my perfect little world. The twins' cries echoed through the house, a constant reminder of the new life I'd brought into this world, and the old one that seemed to be slipping away. I rocked Ethan gently, trying to soothe him while keeping an eye on Alex in his bassinet. "Shh, it's okay, baby," I whispered, my eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Daddy will be home soon." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Mark had barely been home since the boys were born 2 weeks ago. Always another late meeting, another work emergency. I'd given up trying to get him involved in caring for the twins. The front door creaked open, and my heart leapt. "Mark?" I called out softly, not wanting to disturb the finally quiet babies. He appeared in the nursery doorway, looking rumpled and tired. "Hey," he mumbled, barely glancing at me or the twins. "You're home early," I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Want to hold Ethan while I change Alex?" Mark shook his head, already backing out of the room. "Can't. Got a conference call in 5 minutes. Maybe later." Before I could protest, he was gone, the sound of his office door closing like a slap in the face. I felt the familiar sting of tears but blinked them away. I didn't have time for self-pity. The babies needed me, even if their father didn't seem to. The next morning, I woke to find Mark's side of the bed cold and untouched. A note on the nightstand read, "Early meeting? Don't wait up tonight." Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. I crumpled the note, tossing it across the room. This couldn't go on. We needed to talk. I spent the day in a fog of diaper changes, feedings, and stolen moments of sleep. By the time evening rolled around, I was running on fumes and determination. The clock ticked past 8 p.m., then 9, then 10. Still no Mark. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say when he finally showed up. At 11:30, headlights swept across the front window. I steeled myself as the door opened. "Where have you been?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Mark froze, clearly not expecting to find me waiting up. "Work," he said flatly. "I told you not to wait up. Work until almost midnight, every night?" I stepped closer, searching his face. "What's really going on, Mark?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Nothing's going on. I'm just busy." "Too busy for your own children?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't stop now. "They're 2 weeks old, and you've barely looked at them. We need you, Mark. I need you." Something flashed across his face, guilt, annoyance, before he schooled his features into a mask of indifference. "I'm providing for this family, Christina. Someone has to." The implication stung. "And what exactly am I doing? Playing house?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's not what I meant. Look, can we not do this now? I'm tired." "When, then?" I pressed. "Because every time I try to talk to you, you're too busy or too tired. We can't go on like this." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the old Mark, the man I fell in love with, the one who was excited about becoming a father. But then it was gone, replaced by a cold stranger. "I don't know what you want from me," he said, his voice flat. "I'm doing my best." I laughed, the sound hollow. "Your best would be helping with night feedings. Your best would be coming home at a decent hour to spend time with your family. Your best would be actually being present in our lives." Mark's jaw clenched. "I can't do this right now," he muttered, pushing past me towards the stairs. "Mark, wait." I reached for him, but he shrugged me off. "I'm going to bed," he said, not looking back. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." I stood there, watching him disappear upstairs, feeling more alone than ever. The silence of the house pressed in around me, broken only by the soft whimpers coming from the nursery. As I climbed the stairs to tend to my babies, our babies, I realized with a sinking heart that the man I married, the father I thought my children would have, was slipping away. And I had no idea how to bring him back. I stared at the packed suitcase on my bed, my heart heavy with indecision. The twins gurgled softly in their bassinets, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding them. How had it come to this? A gentle knock on the door startled me. "Christina? Can I come in?" It was Dad. "Yeah, come on in," I called, hastily wiping away a stray tear. Dad's eyes immediately fell on the suitcase. His face softened with understanding. "You're leaving?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I can't do this anymore, Dad. Mark, he's not the man I married." Dad sat beside me on the bed, his weathered hand covering mine. "I've been worried about you, sweetheart. The way Mark's been acting, it's not right." "I know," I whispered. "I've tried talking to him, but it's like he's a stranger. He's never home. He barely looks at the twins. I feel so alone." Dad's jaw clenched. I knew something was off. "Christina, there's something you should know. I saw Mark yesterday." My head snapped up. "What? Where?" "At that new restaurant downtown. He was with a woman. They looked close." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "No," I breathed. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe it was a coworker or—" "Honey," Dad interrupted gently. They were holding hands. And the way he looked at her— "I'm so sorry." A sob escaped me, and Dad pulled me into his arms. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the father my children deserved but didn't have. When I finally pulled away, wiping my eyes, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I need to leave. I can't raise the twins in this environment." Dad nodded. "You'll come stay with your mother and me. We've got plenty of room, and we can help with the babies." "Thank you," I said, feeling a wave of gratitude for my parents' unwavering support. As if on cue, the front door slammed. Mark was home. "Christina?" he called. "Where are you?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Up here," I replied, Heavy footsteps on the stairs, then Mark appeared in the doorway. His eyes darted from me to Dad to the suitcase. "What's going on?" "I'm leaving, Mark," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'm taking the twins to my parents." Mark's face darkened. "You can't do that. Those are my children, too." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Oh, now you care about them, after weeks of barely acknowledging their existence?" "That's not fair," Mark protested. "I've been working." "Save it," I cut him off. "I know about the woman, Mark. Dad saw you." Mark paled, his eyes flicking to my father. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been cheating on your wife and neglecting your newborn sons." Mark's shoulders sagged. "Christina, please, we can work this out. I'll do better, I promise." For a moment I wavered. Then I remembered the weeks of loneliness, the unanswered calls, the cold bed. "No, Mark, it's too late for promises. We're leaving." I moved to pick up Ethan, but Mark blocked my path. "You're not taking my kids anywhere." "Step aside, son." Dad's voice was low and dangerous. "Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." Mark's eyes darted between us, desperation etched on his face. "Christina, please, don't do this." I met his gaze, seeing the man I once loved buried beneath layers of deceit. "I have to, Mark. For the twins. For me." With Dad's help, I gathered the twins and our belongings. As we walked out the front door, I turned back one last time. Mark stood in the doorway, looking lost and small. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about custody arrangements," I said, my voice breaking slightly. As Dad drove us away from the house I'd once thought would be my forever home, I felt a mix of grief and relief wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months I felt like I could breathe again. Little did I know, the true battle was just beginning. The familiar street looked different somehow as Dad's car turned the corner. Maybe it was the golden autumn light, or maybe it was the weight of the past few months etched into my very bones. The twins cooed softly in their car seats, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had become our lives. "You sure you're ready for this, honey?" Dad asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I nodded, steeling myself. "I have to face him sometime, Dad. We need to sort out the house situation." As we pulled up to the curb, my heart nearly stopped. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway, and the front door stood wide open. Laughter drifted out. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. "What the hell?" I muttered, unbuckling my seatbelt. Dad's hand on my arm stopped me. "Christina, wait, let me go first." But I was already out of the car, storming up the path I'd walked 1,000 times before. I burst through the open door, the twins' diaper bag clutched to my chest like a shield. The scene that greeted me was surreal. A couple I'd never seen before sat on my couch, our couch, drinking coffee from the mugs Mark's mother had given us as a wedding gift. They looked up, startled. "Oh," the woman exclaimed. "You must be the cleaning service. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I blinked, my mind reeling. "Excuse me?" The man stood up, frowning. "This is a bit awkward. Mr. Stanton, Mark, he said the house would be empty today." "Mark?" I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "What are you talking about? This is my house." The couple exchanged glances. "I'm sorry, there must be some misunderstanding," the woman said gently. "We bought this house from Mark Stanton last week. We're the new owners." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the doorframe for support, vaguely aware of Dad coming up behind me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "He can't have— This house is in my name." Dad's hand was on my shoulder, his voice low and angry. "What's going on here?" The man, Mr. Stanton, I presumed, held up his hands. "Look, we have all the paperwork. Mark Stanton sold us this house fair and square. If there's been some kind of mistake—" "Mistake?" I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "The only mistake was ever trusting that lying, cheating—" "Christina," Dad cut in, his tone warning. He turned to the couple. "I'm sorry, but there's clearly been a misunderstanding. This house belongs to my daughter. It was a gift from me, and it's in her name." Mrs. Stanton's face paled. "Oh, God, Jim, you don't think—" "I think," Dad said firmly, "that we all need to take a step back and figure out what's really going on here. Where's Mark now?" The Stantons looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable. We haven't seen him since the sale closed," Mr. Stanton admitted. "He said he was going out of town for work." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Dad," I whispered, "the twins' college fund, it was in a joint account." Dad's face hardened. "I'll call the bank." and then I'm calling the police. As Dad made his calls, I sank onto the stairs, my mind whirling. How could Mark do this? Sell our home, possibly empty our accounts, and just disappear. The twins began to fuss in their car seats, and Mrs. Stanton hesitantly approached. Can I help with the babies? I looked up at her, this stranger in my home, and saw genuine concern in her eyes. Thank you, I managed, but I think we need to leave. As I gathered the twins and what few possessions I could quickly grab, a steely resolve began to form within me. Mark had betrayed me in ways I couldn't have imagined, but I wouldn't let him destroy us. I would fight for my children, for our home, and for the life we deserved. Walking out of that house, I knew nothing would ever be the same. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. The police station buzzed with activity, but I barely noticed. My focus was entirely on the door through which Mark had disappeared an hour ago. Dad sat beside me, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Miss Thompson? A detective approached, her face unreadable. We're done questioning your husband. Would you like to speak with him? I swallowed hard, nodding. Dad squeezed my hand. You've got this, sweetheart. I'll be right here with the twins. As I followed the detective, my mind raced. What could Mark possibly say to justify what he'd done? How could he explain selling our home, emptying our accounts? The interrogation room was stark and cold. Mark sat at the table, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married, but then his eyes hardened, and I knew the Mark I loved was gone. Christina, he started, but I cut him off. Don't, I said, my voice shaking. Just tell me why, Mark. Why did you do it? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't have a choice. I'm in trouble, Christina. Big trouble. What kind of trouble justifies selling our home, stealing from our children? Mark's laugh was hollow. You wouldn't understand. I got in over my head with some investments. Dangerous people, Christina. They were going to hurt you, hurt the twins if I didn't pay up. I stared at him, disbelief warring with a tiny spark of sympathy. Why didn't you come to me? To my father? We could have helped. Your father, Mark spat, always running to Daddy for help. I wanted to handle it myself, to be the man you deserved. The man I deserved? I echoed, anger rising. The man I deserved wouldn't have lied, wouldn't have cheated. Mark's eyes flashed. Ah, so Daddy told you about that too, did he? It wasn't what you think, Christina. Sarah, she was helping me with the investments. It just got complicated. Complicated, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Is that what you call sleeping with another woman while your wife is home with your newborn twins? He had the grace to look ashamed, but only for a moment. Look, what's done is done, but I have a plan. If you just trust me. Trust you? I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. You've destroyed everything we built together, Mark. How can you possibly expect me to trust you now? Mark leaned forward, his eyes intense. Because I'm still your husband, Christina, the father of your children. We can start over, make things right. I just need you to do one thing for me. I waited, my heart pounding. Tell the police it was all a misunderstanding, that you knew about the sale of the house, about the money. If you do that, I can make this all go away. We can be a family again. For a moment I wavered. The thought of our family whole again, of the life we'd planned, was tempting. But then I thought of the twins, of the future I wanted for them. A future built on honesty and trust, not lies and manipulation. I stood, my decision made. No, Mark, I won't lie for you. Not now, not ever again. His face contorted with anger. You stupid bitch, he snarled. You think you can make it on your own? You're nothing without me. A washed-up housewife with 2 kids and no future. His words hit like physical blows, but I stood my ground. I'd rather be alone than with a man who could betray his family like this. Goodbye, Mark. As I turned to leave, he called out, his voice desperate. Christina, wait, you can't do this. I'll take the twins. I'll make sure you never see them again. I paused at the door, looking back at the stranger who wore my husband's face. Try it, I said, my voice steady. I dare you. Stepping out of that room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in months, I felt truly free. Mark had underestimated me, but I wouldn't make the same mistake. It was time to show the world, and myself, just how strong I could be. The conference room felt suffocating as I sat across from the Stantons and their lawyer. My own attorney, Sarah, a sharp-eyed woman Dad had recommended, sat beside me, her presence reassuring. Mark slouched in his chair, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Let's get straight to the point," Sarah began, her voice crisp. "The house sale was fraudulent. The property is still legally owned by Christina's father." The Stantons gasped, their lawyer leaning forward with interest. Mark's head snapped up, his face pale. "That's impossible," he sputtered. "I had the deed." "A forged deed," Sarah interrupted, sliding a document across the table. "Here's the original, still in Mr. Hath Thompson's name." As the implications sank in, Mrs. Stanton burst into tears. "Jim, what are we going to do? We've already started renovations." I felt a pang of sympathy for them, despite everything. "I'm so sorry," I said softly. "I had no idea Mark would do something like this." Mr. Stanton's face hardened. "We'll be suing for damages, of course. The emotional distress alone." "Now let's not get ahead of ourselves," their lawyer interjected. "Perhaps we can come to some arrangement that benefits all parties." Mark suddenly leaned forward, his eyes wild. "Christina, baby, you've got to help me. These people I owe money to, they're dangerous. If I don't pay them back..." "That's enough, Mr. Thompson," Sarah cut in sharply. "My client is not responsible for your illegal activities." As the lawyers argued, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I knew what I had to do. "I have a proposal," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. All eyes turned to me. "The Stantons can stay in the house, rent-free, for 6 months while they find a new place. In return, they drop any plans to sue." The room erupted in protests and counteroffers, but I held up my hand. "There's more. Mark, I want a divorce, full custody of the twins, and you agree to pay child support based on your actual income, not whatever you've been hiding." Mark's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. I'm their father." "A father who was willing to sell their home out from under them," I retorted. "You've made your choices, Mark. Now face the consequences." The Stantons' lawyer cleared his throat. "My clients might be amenable to this arrangement, provided there's some compensation for the renovations they've already done." Sarah nodded. "We can discuss specifics, but I believe we can work something out." As the details were hashed out, I watched Mark. He seemed to shrink in his chair, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. Part of me ached for the man I thought I'd married, but that man was gone. Just as we were wrapping up, the conference room door burst open. A burly man in a cheap suit stormed in, his eyes locked on Mark. "Thompson," he bellowed. "Time's up. Where's my money?" Mark leapt to his feet, panic etched on his face. "Joey, please, I can explain." The man, Joey, grabbed Mark by the collar. "No more explanations. You pay now, or things get ugly." In that moment, watching Mark cower before this thug, any lingering doubt I had vanished. This was the real Mark Thompson, a coward and a cheat. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I believe I can help resolve this situation." Joey turned to me, his grip on Mark loosening slightly. "And who might you be, sweetheart?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. "I'm Christina Thompson, Mark's soon-to-be ex-wife, and I think it's time we had a chat about exactly what my husband owes you." As Joey released Mark and turned his full attention to me, I felt a surge of determination. This was it, the moment that would define everything. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. For my children, for my future, I would be strong. The courthouse steps loomed before me, a mountain I had to climb. My hands shook as I adjusted the twins in their stroller. This was it, the day that would determine our future. "You ready for this, honey?" Dad asked, his hand steady on my shoulder. I nodded, swallowing hard. As ready as I'll ever be. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. I spotted Mark across the aisle, looking haggard in an ill-fitting suit. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, shame etched across his face. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. I straightened my spine, ready to face whatever came next. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, "we're here today to settle the divorce proceedings between Christina and Mark Thompson, as well as determine custody of their twin sons." What followed was a blur of legal jargon and accusations. Mark's lawyer painted me as an unstable mother, unable to provide for the twins on my own. I bit my lip, fighting back tears as he twisted every aspect of our life together. When it was our turn, my lawyer presented evidence of Mark's infidelity, his gambling debts, and the fraudulent sale of our home. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as the full extent of Mark's deception came to light. "Your Honor," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I'm not here to vilify Mark. He's the father of my children, but his actions have shown that he's not capable of putting their needs first. I'm asking for full custody because I want to give my boys the stable, loving home they deserve." The judge nodded, then turned to Mark. "Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to add?" Mark stood, his eyes darting around the room. I've made mistakes, Your Honor, but I love my kids. I want to be part of their lives." "Even if that means paying child support based on your actual income?" the judge asked pointedly. Mark paled. I can explain about that." Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. Joey, the thug from the conference room, stormed in, flanked by 2 police officers. "There he is!" Joey shouted, pointing at Mark. "That's the guy who owes me 50 grand. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Mark tried to bolt, but the officers quickly apprehended him. As they read him his rights, I caught snippets about fraud and money laundering. Through the commotion, I locked eyes with the judge. Her gaze was sympathetic but firm. With a nod, she gestured for order. "In light of these unexpected developments," she said once the room quieted, "I'm prepared to make my ruling." My heart pounded as she continued. "Full custody of the Thompson twins is awarded to Christina Thompson. Mr. Thompson will have supervised visitation rights, pending the outcome of his criminal charges. Child support will be based on Mr. Thompson's last known legitimate income." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As the officers led Mark away, he broke free and rushed towards me. "Christina, please," he begged, reaching for my hand. "Don't do this. I'll change, I swear. We can start over." I recoiled, shielding the twins' stroller with my body. "It's too late, Mark. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." As Mark was dragged away, his pleas echoing through the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The life I'd planned with Mark was over, but a new chapter was beginning. Outside, surrounded by my family and friends who had come to support me, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The twins gurgled happily in their stroller, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. "What now?" Dad asked gently. I looked down at my boys, then out at the world stretching before us. "Now," I said, my voice strong and clear, "we build a new life, one step at a time." As we descended the courthouse steps, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, I felt truly free. Mark had underestimated me, but I wouldn't make the same mistake. It was time to show the world, and myself, just how strong I could be. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as I poured my coffee, savoring the quiet moment before the twins woke up. It had been a year since the courtroom drama, a year of rebuilding and rediscovering myself. The doorbell rang, shattering the peace. My heart raced as I opened the door to find Mark standing there, looking haggard but determined. "Christina," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to talk to you." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "I'm sorry," Mark began, his eyes fixed on his hands. "For everything. I've had a lot of time to think well, you know." I nodded, remembering the 6-month sentence he'd served for fraud. "Why are you here, Mark?" He took a deep breath. "I want to make things right, for the boys. I've been going to therapy, working on myself. I want to be the father they deserve." Part of me wanted to believe him, to see the man I'd fallen in love with. But I'd been down this road before. "It's not that simple," I said, my voice firm. "You can't just waltz back in and expect everything to be okay." Mark's face fell. "I know, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Please, Christina, give me a chance to prove myself." Before I could respond, the twins' cries echoed from upstairs. As I moved to go to them, Mark stood. "Let me," he said softly. "Please?" I hesitated, then nodded. As Mark climbed the stairs, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Could he really have changed? Watching him tend to the boys, his movements gentle and patient, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I knew better than to let my guard down completely. "Mark," I said as he returned with the twins, "I appreciate that you're trying, but we can't go back to how things were." He nodded, a sad smile on his face. "I know, I don't expect that. I just want to be part of their lives, however you'll let me." As we talked, hashing out boundaries and expectations, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step towards healing for all of us. Later that evening, after Mark had left and the twins were asleep, I sat on the porch with Dad. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a fitting backdrop for reflection. "You did good today, honey," Dad said, squeezing my hand. "I'm proud of you." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you and Mom. You've been my rock through all of this." Dad chuckled. "That's what family's for. But give yourself some credit. You're stronger than you know." As we sat in comfortable silence, I thought about the journey of the past year, the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but also the growth, the resilience, the unexpected joys. I'd gone from a woman who defined herself by her marriage to a strong, independent mother. I'd faced my worst fears and come out the other side, not unscathed, but unbroken. The future was still uncertain. Co-parenting with Mark would be a challenge, and there were sure to be bumps along the road. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly hopeful. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I stood up, stretching. "I think I'm ready to move back into the house," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Dad raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" I nodded. "It's time. That house was meant to be a home for my children. It's time I reclaimed it, on my terms." Dad smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Well then, let's start packing." As we headed inside, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. With my children by my side and the support of my family, I knew I could handle whatever life threw my way. The Christina who had started this journey was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.